So before we begin, I would just like to shout out my patrons, Dudley Reiner, Crimson, Consular, 10, Damacus Whitewood, Nude Banner, and Jonah Rodriguez. I'm very much grateful for your support, and if any of you want to support me on Patreon, you can always find the link in the description below.
Hey guys, I'm Naya and welcome back to the channel. So for today's video, I decided to explain it very briefly. I think it's going to be a part 1 of what I'm hoping to be a multi-part series where I will take a look at the format each month and sort of point out the deck's choke points, where to hand trap them, what cards to use going first, going second, and really break it down when it comes to the best decks of the format. So because we have such a diverse format and so many decks are performing very well, I was thinking of covering multiple decks in multiple parts of this video. Not quite sure how, this series. Not quite sure how it's going to be called yet. Of course, by the title, you will have already known this when clicking on the video. But yeah, it's just going to be a breakdown of what to use against what deck at which point in time. And yeah, that's pretty much going to be it. So before we get started, please let me know down in the comments what you think of the video. And excuse me, I still feel from my best decks video as if I'm getting a cold and my throat is kind of hurting all the time. So bear with the voice, please. But yeah, I truly want your feedback of what you think of this video and if you think this should be a regular thing moving forward and if you actually got something out of it and all of that. So in today's video, we're going to be breaking down Sprite, Tearlament, Adventure Synchro, Adventure Dragon Link, and also Despia. I'm sort of going off of my best decks tier list, and I figured I would cover some of the decks in like tier 1 and tier 2, so we're just going to slowly go through them. And in this video today, we're going to be going through the top 5 decks, although I think the 5th slot is sort of interchangeable between Despia and like Pure Punk, should probably be a bit higher than how I placed it in the best decks list, and like Flunder and things like that. So for today, those are the 5 decks that we are going to be going through. Hopefully this intro wasn't too long, but I wanted to just explain everything when it comes to this new series, I guess, if it actually becomes a standard thing on the channel. So starting off with Sprite. How we're going to address it is we're going to go through the hand traps, but we're only going to be covering the actually like applicable ones into every single matchup. We're not just going to cover every single hand trap for every single deck because some of them are just really lackluster when it comes to hitting a couple decks. So for Sprite, to start things off with Ash. Ash is important, I think, when it comes to stopping the initial plays that the Sprite player would make when it comes to Sprite Starter, Jet, and Blue, simply because those are going to generate advantage no matter what. So if you're thinking of hitting like an actual starter when it comes to Diva and things like that, it might not be so good because they might still have that Jet, Blue, whatever, which is still going to net some kind of advantage, especially because Ash doesn't actually remove the card. So I think it's okay, but for the most part, when it comes to Sprite, probably 2 hand traps should be sort of paired together, or if you're maining going second cards like Dark Ruler and things like that, all of this should probably like be mashed up when it comes to competing against Sprite. But since we are looking at individual hand traps, this is the point in time where I would probably hit Sprite. So moving on, we have DD Crow. Against Sprite, it's important because you can banish Ronin Toadin to be able to cut them off from Toad axis, and also because you know, if you're not using it against that, another target would be the Sprite Elf's Revive target. So that's something to keep in mind when it comes to Crow. And then the next one would be Gamma. Now I think Gamma is extremely important because it actually removes the card from the field. So if you're going to be hitting something, I would be hitting the first thing they go for. So Diva or things like that, what activates on the normal summon, because you're effectively removing the body. Now you can hit other things. It really depends on their hand. But like for the most part, you would want to get rid of the body if it's possible, so they cannot special summon the other ones. The next one is Ogre. Now Ogre is okay, I would say, against Gigantic Sprite, and I only say okay, and it's similar to DD Crow in a sense where they're probably going to be bringing out Sprite Red, and Sprite Red is going to be able to negate a monster effect. So if they have that beforehand, your one hand trap is probably not going to be doing anything. That's also why I advise to use your stuff early, so you don't need to sort of just trade off with a Sprite Red, which isn't really going to do anything. So Ogre is okay on Gigantic Sprite because it won't go through, but on its own, I wouldn't say it's that strong just because of Sprite Red. Now, if there is no Sprite Red, of course, it's okay to use it against Gigantic Sprite because you are denying them access to Swap Frog potentially if they didn't already open it. Now, if they did, that's sort of unfortunate. But yeah, moving on to the next one, which should really be paired up with something else, would be Nibiru. Now, Gigantic Sprite is going to cut you off from Nibiru access. And something to keep in mind as well is you need to use Gamma on things as early as you can, because Gigantic Sprite also prevents you from special summoning Driver. And if you don't special summon Driver, you don't negate. So that's another thing. But when it comes to Nibiru, it's going to completely prevent you from using Nibiru. So of course, you're going to have to pair it up with something else. So if that happens, you are going to need to have something like an Impermanence or something like that to pair both of them together. But overall, Nibiru is sort of falling out of popularity. So if you're still using it, I would use it together with something else. Now, two other things would be Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries to use on Gigantic Sprite or or Sprite Elf. So either of these, it's okay to cut them access to it, but they still have other cards to play with, so you're not completely stopping them. And then the next one would be Chaos Hunter. Now, I want to point this out, like, I don't think Chaos Hunter is that great to side overall because it's not applicable for any other matchup than just Sprite to deny them from getting to the Ronin Totem place. So because it's that lackluster and like that weak, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but it's still okay to be used against it because it's still also a body that they need to deal with, whether it be by using the Smashers or just beating over it with Gigantic Sprite, which would be boosted. So like there are ways to out it, but it would still take them a little more time. That's why I also think it's better than something like Lancia, which really isn't great right now. But yeah, I'm sort of deviating from the main topic. What would be the going first and going second cards? We're also going to be covering that. So going first against Sprite, Judgment and Warning, so Solemn Judgment and Solemn Warning are definitely important because you deny them from the normal summon so they don't have anything on field to special summon other things. You need to keep in mind their Sprite Starter, of course, or if they're still doing any kind of like extender plays through Emergency Teleport and stuff like that, they can have extenders. But I would still say Judgment and Warning are strong. And then you also have Deck Devastation Virus, which effectively hits the entire deck. So that's busted. You still have Shadow Imprisoning Mirror. Now this one is also okay because you still have like dark targets to prevent them from using them. Now there's also Mischief of the Gnomes. This one is a bit more specific, and I also covered this card and other cards when I talked about Sprite counters. So to go a bit more in depth, you can check out my other videos. But yeah, Mischief of the Gnomes is definitely useful. And then you also have Floodgates. Like, all of them are also like could be considered okay. Like it's not just one, but you look at Ghost and Rivalry, there can be, you have different attributes, different types, but not with every single monster. So it's kind of weird, but they are not bad against this deck, most definitely. Now going second, Sphere Mode and Lava Golem are extremely strong, not exactly applicable to be used in every single deck, but they are strong against this deck because they are always going to have those bodies present on the board. Now another very important card is Ultimate Slayer. You just send a link, that would be Trouble Sunny, and Trouble Sunny is going to get rid of another card non-targeting, which is kind of cool for a card. So you get rid of two cards through Ultimate Slayer, get rid of the Sprite Elf, get rid of something else, which would be Toad. And yeah, you force out the negate anyway, so like you're doing a lot with only one card. Now you also have Dark Ruler, of course. So negation cards, like Dark Ruler is amazing because it hits the entire board. Droplet is like okay if you can get rid of cards for Droplet. Not many decks play it because they can't really afford to run it. But Droplet is okay, but you need to keep in mind that some builds actually play Herald of Arclight, and with Herald you can't use Droplet. So that's important to note. So if you're sending from hand, naturally, you cannot use it. Then also you have Pancratops and, well, Alpha the Master Beast as well. But I like Pancratops overall because it's a quick effect, like more than Alpha. So I'm just going to be addressing Pancratops when it comes to this. Some people still play Dupe Frog. So if they play Dupe Frog, this card is going to be kind of horrible because you're not really doing anything. They're forcing an attack. So it's not that great. And yeah, with that, we're going to jump to the Tearlament deck. If we start again with Ash. Ash is important because you are able to use it on your turn or on their turn because you have the Hofnis, which is going to trigger during your turn as well. So you might want to actually trade it off with that card because you know, you are going to have some kind of disruption like just dumped on your head if you don't. So that's something to keep in mind. And then you're also able to use Ash on their turn. And I would suggest to use it like on any of the names, essentially. Maybe I wouldn't use it on Mary just because you're able to like mill random cards. So I wouldn't suggest to use it on that. Now also you're able to use it on the Kitcala search if you're really afraid of the trap card. So that's something to keep in mind. And then also another thing, and I just want to briefly touch upon that, there are of course different versions. So branded, punk, all of that, and depending on which version it is, you're also going to need to adjust where you hand trap the deck. So when it comes to branded, naturally just add branded fusion because they get too much advantage if you don't. Now if it comes to the punk deck, it's kind of weird because it's more obvious where to hand trap the deck, but also they just bait out your hand traps with the punk portion. So it's kind of odd. Like, yeah, you can Ash some of the punk stuff, but then they might have something else to continue with their plays. So yeah, just I guess when it comes to punk things, just use it on whatever you feel like is fitting at that point in time. Then next up we have Crow. Crow is incredible because you're able to Crow the card that activates in the graveyard to fusion summon because they need to place themselves on the bottom of the deck as well. So you just banish it, they don't get the fusion summon. And naturally, because you're able to use Crow, you don't care about chain links because it's like whenever, you just use it. So if they're trying to chain block, something like Bell or Skullmeister would be worse. Now we can adjust them as well because they're both able to hit the graveyard effects and prevent them. But since they need to be chained, they are able to be just completely chain blocked out of the entire chain and they're not really useful. Whereas when it comes to Crow, Crow is incredible because it does need to be chained. So there's that. Then moving on to Gamma. When it comes to Gamma and Ogre, I wouldn't suggest using them on anything on the field because they will trigger in the graveyard, so they are not that great. But you're able to use Gamma on the graveyard effect, again depending on where it is on the chain. I think Nibiru is really nice depending on the variant. So some variants are going to summon more than others, so you will be able to use it, but not against every single one of them. So if you're still signing it or even maybe maining it, that's where I would use it on. Then we also have negation hand traps such as Valor Impermanence, Mourner, and I would suggest using them on Kitcalas because Kitcalas is going to grant them really a lot of advantage. And if you're using it on anything else, like at some point they are going to be getting to that Kitcalas anyway if they have more than one effect, like more than just Rhino Heart, for example. So I would probably suggest like using it on Kitcalas more than anything else. So if you maybe do it as a 6th card, naturally just play it into the board. And then we also have Ghost Reaper because Reaper is incredibly strong when it comes to removing Kitcalas because they are quite dependent on it. And then another one, this one is like probably the strongest one of them all, and also why Exo Sister is like shining in their matchup with Tier Limit, of course it would be Dimension Shifter. If you shifter them, like what are they doing? Every single card of theirs is going to get banished and they don't get any value out of that. So shifter is very, very strong, but because it's that specific, of course you can't use it in every single deck, but I still think it's incredibly useful. And yeah, moving on to the going first and going second cards. For going first cards, T-Barrier, naturally, very, very strong, just Cold Fusion and that's it. Another one that's kind of cool is also Different Dimension Ground because it is basically like a shifter in the form of a trap card. Then you also have Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, which completely just shuts them off because they are dark. All of them are dark. So, well, except Rhino Heart, but like most of them are dark. So Shadow Imprisoning Mirror, very, very nice. Then also Rivalry is okay because they have like a lot of different types and they're going through a lot of different plays and things. So Rivalry, very nice in stopping them. You also have Necro Valley. Not exactly very popular, but it is useful against them. So there's that when it comes to going first cards. And going second, you actually have a couple things to be able to play against Tier Limit. I would say something like Mystic Mine is really, really nice. They won't play Crime usually. That's also why Evenly Matched, Lightning Storm, like just blowout cards are incredibly strong because normally they won't have any kind of negation. Then of course Dark Ruler and Droplet, also strong. And then you also have Ultimate Slayer, which is able to be used because they are a fusion deck, so you get some kind of value off of Entes because you're popping another card. So that's something to keep in mind. And you also have Super Polymerization, also very strong against this deck. You have Lava Golem in Sphere mode because they will have some kind of monster presence. Lava Golem is usually better, like if you're like an Eldritch deck, you have space for everything. But for the most part, I would just side in Lava Golem because you never know what people end up on. But yeah, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, both of them are okay. And then for the last one, we actually have Book of Eclipse, because like Book of Eclipse is really, really nice because for their trap cards, they need to have their monster face up. So not only do you book them face down, but you also turn off their trap cards, so you do two things with only one. For the next one, we have Adventure Dragon Link. So Dragon Link is very, very weird. Let me just say this right off the start. It's very weird to hand trap because you never know what they might have. There are busted hands and there are just horrible hands in which Imperming Striker Dragon would do the job. So that's really important to keep in mind when it comes to hand trapping or just doing anything against Dragon Link. So to sort of give you a couple guidelines, when it comes to Ash, like, yeah, Chaos Space feels like a great Ash, like Ashable card, but they do play Gamma. So if you're not that certain, you might want to be sort of wary of them having Gamma. So naturally, their first play is going to be Chaos Space. So you need to sort of decide. But yeah, Ash and Chaos Space usually would be the call. If not that, of course, you're able to Ash Enchantress, because for the most part, Adventure Dragon Link is going to be a thing. And then again, you might be playing into Gamma. So it's weird. That's why I say it's weird. But yeah, again, like you would probably have to prevent the Enchantress, like to do anything, because if you don't, you're going to get like the Griffin Rider on the field anyway. So another kind of okay play would maybe be to just Ash the Faithful, because in theory, if they wanted to have a free discard off of Faithful, they would have had to summon something to get the Draco back. So they have a card on field, they can't Gamma you. So then when they go for the search, you use Ash and you prevent the Griffin Rider from coming. So that's something. And then also like Ashing Dragon Ravine sometimes is really strong, or even a well-timed Ash on a quick launch sometimes. Even an emergency teleport, but all of these situations are maybe more in like a weird simplified game state. So for the most part, I would just suggest that you decide sort of the feeling you have about them having Gamma or not, or just add something like a Dragon Ravine if their cost is not that busted, because they're just desperately trying to get to Tracer, or Ash the Eps Router, so something along those lines. But of course, an okay play would definitely be to Ash Hulky Fibrax. So they are going for some kind of Rose Dragon line anyway, so Ashing Fiber is also okay. And then when it comes to Gamma, same thing goes. Like maybe Enchantress, like you probably have to, or just use Gamma on like the Griffin Rider, because they will probably have something on the field anyway, so you don't play into their Gamma. There's also like Gamma on Romulus maybe, if you want to like sort of stop them from getting anywhere, if they don't have that much advantage in their hand, and if they don't chain block it with something like the baby dragons. Then you have Tracer, if you maybe want to just negate that, if you feel like they don't have any other follow-up plays. Also Hulky Fibrax would be okay. So all of these are applicable, but it's kind of weird to like necessarily tell when to do it. So yeah, then moving on to Ghost Ogre, it's okay because they have Adventure. So if you're still using Ghost Ogre, just use it on Faithful. Just get rid of that engine. And then also when you have Nibiru, like it's very, very similar to the other matchups. Like you need to pair it up with something else if they have the adventure stuff online, because if they have, they'll go from Griffin to Baron, so you won't be able to do anything. So you need to pair it up with something else. And then for the negation hand traps, again, just use it on whatever you feel like is necessary, whether that be Romulus, Hulky Fibrax, even Chaos Ruler sometimes if you don't want them to have any kind of advantage, or Tracer if it's a more of a simplified game state. But yeah, maybe pair it up with something else. If they have Griffin Rider, again, you know, just use Nibiru, Imperm, something along those lines. But then moving on to some other hand traps, of course, Droll is really, really nice against Dragon Link for the most part. You are going to be able to shut them off from getting additional resources. And then also, don't play into Gamma though. Like if they go Chaos Space, get something, again, you might want to watch out for Gamma with that Droll on Resolution. So yeah, there's that when it comes to Droll. Collector is like nice if you're still using it. I don't think you should, probably, because it's not that impactful against most of the other matchups. But yeah, hitting the adventure part with Collector is also okay. And like Dimension Shifter, you know, since it's useful against tier limits, some people will probably play it. So yeah, Shifter is okay because you get rid of all of the like resources, I guess, that the Dragon Link player would have at their disposal. Like the only thing they can use from the banish pile would be like Pisty. to revive, but you don't get the Chaos Ruler revive back, you don't get Lights and Darks for summons, you don't get Chaos Space for recycling, you don't get like, you know, a rocket in the graveyard to be able to revive it with Borderland or get it back with Striker Dragon to summon with Boot. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, on the topic of Boot, you can Ogre Boot. Like, you can use Ghost Ogre on Boot if they didn't really get to the adventure stuff. And also, when it comes to negation stuff, another thing to add would be you can keep the impermanence maybe if you want to use it on Borderlands. So if you're in that kind of weird situation and you might have another like going second card or something that you want to pair those up together, because Borderland is like horrible to deal with if you don't like necessarily have the tools at your disposal when it comes to your engine. So like sometimes impermanence on Borderland just feels really good because you're actually able to get rid of it. Now as for going first cards against the deck, the one I would advise the most would like probably be Anti-Spell, just because, you know, adventure stuff, spells, and the only things they can like realistically chain would be emergency teleport and quick launch. So you need to keep in mind, yeah, those can be chained and they might have backrow removal going second, but they also might have other going second cards, which would be spells. So they have adventure stuff, they have the field spells, there's Chaos Space, there's Basil Rose Shoot, so a lot of stuff. And then on top of that, there's going second cards, which might be spells. So I think Anti-Spell is okay. Now, another one to keep in mind would maybe be D-Barrier, but I'm not that certain I would recommend it because it's still like Dragon Link. You know, it can still do the link stuff and the link plays and get to at least something, even if it doesn't go through the synchro stuff. Synchro is very, very important, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you're able to do some kind of plays at least if you're like playing triple burst and things like that, and you're able to just get the pointers and you get to some monsters, even if you only get to like Borderland or you get to Access Code to blow out the entire field because you are going second. So like, I don't think it's that great. I might be wrong, but I still wanted to like include it so you know it's like an option if you're truly just wanting to side out like a going second card and just put something better in. And another thing to use going first would be some kind of floodgate. Like floodgates, except like maybe rivalry, but again, like they are using adventure stuff. So floodgates are inherently nice against adventure, but also have a downside because they're able to be outed with Dracoback. So if they didn't get to Dracoback yet, there's still some kind of option to just keep them locked down. But yeah, Dracoback, of course, is a thing to keep in mind. But yeah, that would probably be it. Like, I don't think there's that much to really cite in going first, but going second, there are a couple options. So the first two would be Dark Ruler, Droplet, really nice into a monster-heavy board. You also have Ultimate Slayer. So naturally, like, Borderland cannot be targeted by monster effects, but Ultimate Slayer gets around that. So if they're ending on Borderland, that's nice because you're able to go Ultimate Slayer, send Trouble Sunny, deal with something else. Then you also have if they're ending on Spheres because they might be playing around Super Poly, and I'll get to that. But if they're using that, again, Link, send something else. And since I touched upon Super Poly, it's kind of weird because if they don't respect it enough, you're able to get rid of Borderload, and both of them with Karura. But if they do respect it, they won't put those kinds of types and attributes on the board. So it might not be that great, but overall Super Poly is not bad against them to go into the Starving Venom, for example. So it's not necessarily bad. And then also you have Lava Golem in Sphere mode. Really, really nice. But keep in mind that spheres do get, like, they get their effect if they are attributed. And then I would also want to mention Pankratops. Like, I just keep hyping up Pankratops, but I genuinely think it's not bad because it's able to deal with two things. So if they end up on IP, for example, or even spheres, you know, and you're threatening battle phase, they need to do something. If they go IP and you chain to, like, bait out the negate, you dealt with two things. Now, if you threaten battle phase when it comes to spheres, maybe they even let you to go, let you go into it, so you maybe wasted it, but still they need to activate it. You just chain, again, dealing with two things. So I wouldn't say it's bad. I would think it's quite okay, even if you need to, like, give up your battle phase at the end of the day. And another thing, the last thing, would be Called By. You can keep it in going second because Fierce tributes for cost, so you're just able to deal with it and they don't get the second effect. So that's really nice. Also, Called By against Snow is okay because they're playing Snow as well, so that's really annoying. But yeah, that would be it for Dragon Link, and now we're moving on to Adventure Synchro. So Ash, again, I would deal with the punk stuff as soon as I can. So ashing Xiaomin or Foxy Toon is okay in my opinion. You also have Hulky Fibrax, so ashing Hulky Fibrax is okay as well. Then you have DD Crow, which is okay to be able to be used on Scythe and Snow. Now Scythe does get set and popped with TG Wonder. Sometimes if it's in the graveyard because it got milled or something, then they would revive it, but it's different options. So Crow on either of these is okay, not that great because you're not actually like preventing the combo. Like maybe just at that point you're preventing that particular thing. But yeah, like overall with this deck, I would say the best thing to do is pair up 2 hand traps because they have adventure stuff, so they're able to get to that. So that's something to ash as well. And then you also have Gamma, which is able to hit any of the punk stuff. Again, Hulk, adventure. So you're just really trying to prevent them from going too crazy because you won't be able to stop them with only 1 hand trap if that happens. And then you also have Ghost Ogre. Again, on adventure things would probably be the best point in time to use it. Something to keep in mind when it comes to Gamma and Ogre, so they do remove the body. So if you hit Zeamin, you're getting rid of the tuner that they would use to go into Hulk. So that's very useful. And then you also have like the negation hand traps. Again, use it on something to like prevent them going completely off, because if you don't, like even going into their board, if you use it on Hulky Fibrax, which would be preferable so they don't get to TG Wonder, yeah, they can't chain Hulk, but they might have a negate. So again, you would need to be pairing 2 things together. But if they only have the Hulk and they're like solely relying on going for the artifact scythe, it's really nice to just shotgun it because they need to use Hulk during the main phase or battle, but cannot be used in standby or draw, so just use impermanence on Hulk. And then a couple other ones would be similarly to Dragon Link. Actually, you have Joel, very useful, again also token collector, so both of them aren't exactly seeing a lot of play. Still wanted to mention them. If you are siding them for whatever reason, they're useful against those matchups. Going first cards would be again Anti-Spell. Really nice, very similar to Dragon Link because they are quite reliant on their spell portion of the deck. Also D-Barrier to just call Synchro to prevent all of this happening. Again, just like Dragon Link, Floodgates, because they have adventure stuff. So yeah, in theory, they're able to bounce the Floodgates, but if they don't get to that like immediately, you're still keeping them in like under some kind of lock. And going second cards would be Ruler, Droplet, like they are just obvious go-tos. Scythe is very important to deal with. So a couple things to address would be like just using impermanence if you have it, or Droplet to just completely prevent that from happening. You also have options like I mentioned before with DD Crow and things like that. But then again, like if you are very scared, you might even want to use something like Cosmic Cyclone because you know where it is, but it's still a bit weird because they are still able to like get it out of the graveyard, so at that point you're not really doing a lot. So it's kind of weird. I guess I just wanted to mention it. Wouldn't really suggest it, but it depends. Then you also have the usual Lava Golem Sphere mode. Again, really strong. And since, like I said before, Hulk needs to be used, you can just immediately tribute over it, so nothing really happens, so that's busted. And then again, Ultimate Slayer. If you go for links, they can't chain Hulk, so pretty much it's just revolving around preventing Hulk from getting to that TG Wonder Magician. So yeah, that would be it. And now we're moving on to Branded Despia. So Ash, naturally, Ash Branded Fusion. It's the best one. In a simplified game state, you might want to decide, but like the first thing would be ashing that Branded Fusion. Now the next one will actually be DD Crow because it's busted against Despia when it comes to their target for Branded in red. And also, as of late, Despia has been using the Scythe lock, which of course is healthy and interactive and really nice. But if you have that DD Crow, you can get rid of Scythe because they do bring it out with Expulsion. So Expulsion would get 2 monsters out of the graveyard, and if they special summon something to your field, which can happen depending on what you use. If they summon something to your field, you can't use Gamma, you can't use Impermanence because you have a monster on the field. So DD Crow completely prevents Scythe from coming out of the graveyard and also prevents the target from Branded in red. Now, if they don't hard draw Branded in red or like search it or do something, if their hand is not really nice and they are setting that Branded Expulsion with Albion, then you don't need to like worry about Branded in red, but it's still a good thing to hit if you're in that situation. As for the other hand traps, to just quickly touch upon them, I wouldn't really want to mention them. It's kind of weird. they don't seem to do that much against this deck in particular. So the last ones I would touch upon would be the negation hand traps. Now, if they have Branded and Lost active, it's not strong at all because on summon, you cannot do anything. Now, if they don't, of course, you're able to hit Lubellion. Usually will probably be Lubellion, but it really depends. So just hit that, prevent Mirror Jade from just coming down. And you can also just keep it to be able to use it on Mirror Jade and just prevent it from disrupting you during your turn. So it really depends whether or not you draw multiple things, or you maybe know you're going to be able to prevent Guardian Chimera, so you want to keep it to use it on like Masquerade or Mirror Jade. It really depends. Now, as for going first card, the Barrier naturally completely just shuts off the deck, and that spell is also kind of nice. Like, they can chain Branded Opening, but other cards are spells, so you just completely lock them out. You also have Floodgates if they are already doing some kind of plays. So if you play them correctly, if you wait, then you can really put them in a weird predicament. And as for going second cards, Ultimate Slayer again like comes to this list because, again, paired up with Entis, it's incredible when going up against a fusion deck. So there's that. You also have Ruler and Droplet. It's kind of weird with those cards, and that's actually very similar to Tearlament, because if they have another window when it comes to Tearlament, you're not really doing a lot by using Ruler and Droplet on the current field. And similarly to that, you have Despia, because Branded in Red is going to be activated at some point. But if you can't even play it through like the Mirror Jade Banish or something like that, or even through Masquerade, if you don't have enough, like, I guess, gas to deal with Masquerade as soon as possible so you don't run out of life points, then you need to use it immediately, that be the Dark Ruler or Droplet. So yeah, it's kind of weird. It depends. If you can use it like later on to prevent the Guardian Chimera pops, that's also really busted. But yeah, it really depends on your hand. Now, also something to keep in mind would be they don't put up any kind of negation, which a lot of decks do, actually, not just some, but Despia doesn't. So it's really prone to just completely be blown out by something like Evenly or even Lightning Storm. So those would be really nice cards to side in. And overall, back row removal, I would recommend it. You just completely get rid of the Branded in Red disruption if you immediately use that back row removal. So that's very, very nice. And they might have some other stuff set as well. Another useful card, definitely Super Polymerization, amazing against the fusion deck, so also really good. And then also another one would be Mystic Mine. Like, Mystic Mine is really nice. They usually won't have an out if they're not exactly maining it. So yeah, Mystic Mine is still cool against Branded. And you also have Called By. Again, just use it as like the fourth copy of DD Crow, because going second, if you hit that target, or if you hit Snow, or if you hit Sight, it's also really busted. So those would be the going second cards. And with that, we're actually done. That's it. That's the first 5 decks. Hopefully this video didn't take too long, and hopefully you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun, like, gathering all of the info. And to round this video off, I want to shout out my teammates, because they did compile this huge spreadsheet to like counter the best decks for our team, and it really helped me with just inspiring this video and having a place to sort of fact check all of the research that I did. So shout out to them for that. And yeah, please let me know if you got anything out of this video. I would really, really want to know. And of course, if you liked it, if you enjoyed, please like it and sub to the channel and check out all the social media, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.